All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our 2 o'clock briefing today. Future factories require new skills and trust in big bots and human rights focus. The speakers on our briefing today are Casey Morris, NIST Information Modeling and Testing Group Leader, the Systems Integration Division Engineering Lab in Gaithersburg, Maryland; Sarah Fletcher, Senior Research Fellow at the Industrial Psychology and Human Factors, the Center for Structures, Assembly and Intelligent Automation at Cranefield University; and Anu-Hanna Anttila, Head of Research, the Finnish Industrial Union, and Adjunct Professor at the University of Turku. So we will hear a few remarks from each of our speakers, and then we will take your questions. Thank you.
So, what I'm going to talk to you about a little bit is how we are going to prevent this type of situation from occurring. This is a picture from the play where the term robot was first coined in 1928. And as you can see, the robots are taking over the factory. They were all factory workers, and they were going to kill everyone. But that's not what's happened. And so let's think a little bit about what's happening in the factories today, because it's called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. We're able to collect more and more and more data about the different machines that we're using. And in doing so, we're able to control those machines better than ever before. The Economist has estimated that 30 billion new devices in the industrial space alone will be brought online by 2025. So this is a data explosion. And what this means for the future factory workers is they're going to need to know how to work with that data and work with data-driven machines. But at the same time, the human ingenuity is probably the most important thing that people can bring to this situation. And so on the shop floor, there's more and more tools to help people work with those machines. And what we're finding is that we're using that data to better control the machines themselves. And the machines are tools for our own purposes. So the level of detail that's needed in order to make these machines work is what's really important in the work for the future factory workers. And so here you see a picture of a person working with a robot, and the green box there is tracking the space in which the person is located so the robot won't interfere with her. The yellow box is tracking her vision, what she's paying attention to, so that the robot can anticipate her moves. And so tomorrow I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, this is a physical interaction between a person and a machine, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a project we've been doing, which we call a joint cognitive activity. And I'll describe how we're using natural language processing to help people better understand what's going wrong with the machines that they're working with. That, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Casey. I'll be talking about the human side of things a bit more. We know that human-robot collaboration is on the increase. Humans are going to be working in closer proximity and more collaboratively with people, and there's psychological impacts as well as physical impacts. So a lot of my work is to do with investigating the psychology side of things, and so my talk will be focused on the development of more scientific analysis techniques to investigate those impacts. It's very important that we do that. There's a lot of work rushing into being published, and a lot of research work out there that is investigating human-robot interaction. But unfortunately, a lot of it doesn't undertake a robust approach, a scientific approach to the human side of the analysis. As has been traditional for many years, the focus is on the technical development. And that's probably how it should be, but we need to start thinking about the people now if we want to have successful systems. We know from many years of implementation that success depends on human acceptance and trust of all technologies. So in short, my talk tomorrow will be about my work with the European Union and in the UK to develop scientific analysis techniques. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. I'm focusing on industrial workers, how they experience the changes of work on the shop floor level and what kind of experiences they have had. We have executed in Finland several surveys. The number of respondents are from 2,000 to 3,000, even more, and there are quite promising results. So we know that digitalization will change the social networks on the workplaces and also the division of work. On the factory's shop floor, they are working beside each other or without human actors, different kind of non-human actors. And these are, for example, making situations and various versions of interaction, like face-to-face interaction, like social, people by people, and also human-machine interaction, as well as human-computer interaction, and naturally that Internet of Things, which means that there are no human persons or actors working on. So we know that all that challenges the capacity and competence of manual workers who will become more knowledge workers when the digitalization will grow and go on the next years and decades. And that's my topics of tomorrow.
Great, thank you. Now we'll open up the floor to questions. If you have a question, kindly raise your hand. We'll bring a mic to you, and please state your name and affiliation before your question. We have one over here to start.
Hi, it's Tom Whipple of the Times. Anu-Hanna, can you give us a bit more details about what you found in these surveys and what the results are and how we're getting along with robots at the moment?
Yeah, we know that 12% of Finnish industrial companies are so-called digiforerunners. They are having all kind of digital equipment, robots, automatic machines, also whatever mobile phones and tablets people are using there. And Finnish workers are quite common to use different kind of mobile vehicles. You have to know that there are 5.5 Finns in the world, and almost everybody is owning a smartphone and using daily internet. So that doesn't mean that they know how to work with them. They are mainly for fun and play and make, for example, bank businesses and whatever they are serving themselves in internet. So we have found that it's quite typical that people are working with that kind of very simple automats, which are staying and doing quite heavy and dangerous work, also monotonous work, and that's fine because it's question of health safety and that kind of things, industrial safety. And also people are quite commonly using digital digital platforms and that kind of places where they can fix, for example, the processes which is going on in a manufacturing industry and so. So I think the experiences are quite interesting, but also the attitudes of Finnish industrial workers, they are very, very supportive to that. They are not afraid.
Question in the back.
Hi. So I've read that one way for people to be more forgiving of robots' idiosyncrasies, maybe even failures, is to give them names, just like human names. And I'm wondering if there are other like non-technological ways that we can kind of ease the transition of people working with robots that you may be familiar with.
I'll take that one. Yes, I mean, the thing that to bear in mind is that you want trust and acceptance of robots, but you don't want over familiarity to the point of complacency and relationships building that could be detrimental. And I think that's, it might sound a bit dramatic, but that's where we are at the moment, trying to understand how the human-robot relationship will how it will turn out. For example, I've seen many a time on the shop floor a worker being sensitive about somebody borrowing his tool or toolbox. And so then we have to think about how a relationship will build with a robot that's assisting them every day, and then maybe that being used by somebody else. So I suppose I'm not answering your question exactly in that, how do we encourage that relationship? I suppose I'm sort of putting a note of caution out there that it's not always about, adjusting and developing such familiarity that they're best friends. That might not always be the best thing to do. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that there's a so I'll say, I've read that with like digital assistants, that there's like certainly like people are really attuned to the gender dynamics. A lot of our digital assistants, the default voice is a female voice. Do you encounter, or do you try to guard against those kind of gendered relationships with robots on the factory floor?
That's not something that I'm working on personally. No, I don't. That's not something we're concerned with. It's more the impact of the robot on things like cognitive demand, situation awareness, the aspects of well-being and performance, not preference so much. So I think we're with the gender voices and things like that, we're talking about preference perhaps. I don't know.
I'll just add to that the vast majority of robots in manufacturing now, which is not new, they don't have an identity. They're machines, they're tools, and the complexity of those tools is growing and growing. But I mean, I suppose there will be virtual assistants of various kinds, but from my position, I don't see people really thinking of them as things much beyond tools.
Yeah, I can give an answer also. We have asked our so-called survey panel members what they call the robots, and they have given nicknames to them. Some of them are like dummies, but quite usually they are male. I don't know why. Maybe they are so heavy lifting ones or big ones, or I don't know why, but that's the way how it's handled.
Question here in the second row.
Hi, my name is Felix from Arte. Future factories require new skills. So my question is, what have you found out about how these new skills are being trained and applied to people who have been working on the shop floor for a long time, especially in the Midwest and the Rust Belt? I think this is a major issue.
Well, that's really not my area of expertise, but I will say a lot of work is going into trying to understand the training issues, and I think I should leave it at that because I can't go into more detail. Yeah.
From my awareness, I think you've hit a sore spot. I don't think the training is a priority at the moment. I think the push is to develop the systems before we understand the human impacts and the skills requirements. So that might be a bit of a bold statement, but I do feel that it will come, but I think technology always leads. It leads standardization, for example. At the moment, you in the formal standards for the integration of robotics, the focus is very much on safety, as it should be, but safety functions, not psychological safety and psychological requirements and the other softer aspects that I think skills training would involve.
Well, we know that the first robots came, for example, in Turku Maye shipyard, which is building the biggest cruisers in the world, in the 80s. So they are quite familiar with working with them. And we know also in Finnish researchers and also Danish surveys, when we have asked, is there some probes if you are having robots and other vehicles or that kind of systems, if you are losing jobs? And the answer is obviously not yes, but no. It means that those companies who are investing digital capital, they are also investing human capital. It seems to be that they are having key persons who have that knowledge, experience, and also tacit knowledge how to work with these. But it doesn't mean that you don't have to learn more because the systems are changing, the digital equipments are changing, and also softwares, whatever you are using, are coming faster and so. So naturally, quite many of companies, they are having their own programs to give education to that.
Sure.
So when you talked about the transition from factory to knowledge worker, can you maybe share some examples of what you have found out, how that works in Finland?
Yeah. It means, for example, that you are using laptop when you are, for example, trying to get some tools from automatized warehouses. So using laptop, and then there might be a mobile robot which is bringing it to you. So it makes your work easier and faster, and also people think it's, the first step was it was quite funny, but now they think it's quite easy to use, and it's also a question of safety, naturally. Something more? Okay.
Question over here.
One thing robots are, Tom Keenan, Business Edge, one thing robots are really good at is collecting and reporting data. Are you finding any paranoia where people go, well, that thing's going to rat me out if I don't work hard enough?
Yes, and I think that that's a concern because obviously in the workplace you don't get much choice. And what one thing that I've been working on is the transition from a workforce that has lived in a culture of being fearful of hazardous robots. They're all caged off, and now they've got to be, they're coming to terms, and this goes back to the skills question. They're having to come to terms with the fact that, oh no, this robot's safe, and now you're expected to work with it. And then, of course, there is the data issue as well. It's some of the work that we're doing in the EU, for example, is developing automated systems that will self-adjust to adapt to the person's profile and preferences. And of course that is good for the worker, but it involves having that profile data. So we have to be very careful. It's not a showstopper, but we have to be careful. And I think there are some sensitivities, quite rightly.
Question here.
Thank you. Robin Williams from ABC in Australia. When Carol Chapek wrote about robots 100 years ago, nearly,
Almost, yeah.
it was suggesting, as you saw in the picture, that they take our jobs away. But sometimes we want our jobs taken away. And that is when, for example, in Kiruna, in the Arctic Circle in Sweden, you don't necessarily want to spend your day underground digging iron ore, especially when it's freezing cold, and especially when it's really boring. So you want a robot to do it. That's much nicer. And what they do in enlightened places like Scandinavia, as I think you'll agree, is they look for an alternative. And in Kiruna, they turned it into a space station. And the ex-miners were called engineers, and they did creative things. Now, I wonder, in that ideal world, whether you're seeing that kind of transition going on in any area where you work. Creative from slave.
Well, I think that's certainly the case. When we talk about the transition to the knowledge economy, it's a gradual transition. So as people introduce these machines into the workplace, they're usually working with the worker and saying, look, I've got this machine that can do that sorting task that you used to spend hours doing for you. And so now I want you to take this to the next higher step. And I'm not sure what the next higher step is in that case, but it's an incremental step. And so I think that's certainly the case. And with the manufacturers that I've been engaged with, and at least in the United States, but I think this is probably true worldwide, is they can't get enough workers right now. there's always opportunities for people to move into new and related spaces and use that automation to help them be more productive. So.
I have to say, I'm working now in labor union, so that point of view, the changes of division of work and collecting data, when the machines and computers are mining data under your skin, for example, and trying to find something which is very personal and individual. So we know also that as a result of digitalization, the value of work will increase. So that means that we have to ask two main questions, which are who owns the data which is collected, and also how it will be used, and in which way should you ask, for example, these individuals how it will be used, or are you making money of that only?
Okay, well, in my experience, the good thing at the moment in the current state is that robotics are replacing the jobs that aren't value added for for people that not monotonous or repetitive, hard ergonomically, and that the robotics cannot replace the very dexterous, the very cognitively demanding in terms of decision making, those sorts of tasks, which is at the current moment that's a good thing. So we I think we're in a good place at the moment that human robot collaboration means that we can have robots working alongside people, but perhaps to relieve them of the less desirable work. And in my presentation tomorrow, I will have one example from aerospace of where that's happening.
And that might also divide how robots are used, and when human actors are needed. I think it will be that way. It will be a question of class. If you are having good money for that human hand is giving a service to you and cutting your hair, not an automat, for example. So you're voluntary to pay with that. So it's going to be more expensive, I think.
Just to add one more thing, one of the examples I'll go through tomorrow is how you can use natural language processing combined with the human input to get to results that would be very hard to do alone, either by the machine or by the human alone. And I think that you'll find more and more opportunities like that. So the computer is doing what the computer is good at, the human's doing what the human is good at, and the human is driving that process. So yeah, come to the talk, you can hear more about it.
Question here.
Sarah Napton from the Telegraph in London. I was wondering if you come across any clashes between humans and machines from your research. I know it feels like every other day there's another Amazon warehouse story where someone's been sacked by robot, or they've had an injury, or things are going wrong. I just wondered if you had found any examples of where out in the real world there are big problems.
No.
Not for me personally, no. Just as an aside, I think I was referring back to the traditional design or arrangement of systems where heavy industrial robotics were placed upstream for the heavy, repetitive, low-skill jobs. And I think that from our review of statistics of injuries, in those times, they were always due to somebody circumventing the physical guarding rather than the robot itself. So, but we're living in new times with autonomous systems. So, but nothing from me.
Neither have I. Mainly, it has been a question of safety and industrial health that will improve the workers' workplace safety and so. And mainly the worries which we have found in our surveys are that kind of, if they are the when you are working, it looks like a more play, and then you can't focus to that task. So intensively, it will take you with that. So that kind of worries they have had, but not yet any experiences of that. It's only some kind of imagination how it will take you with.
The robots come out of the physical guarding. Is there any limit to the size of robots that can interact directly on the shop floor with humans? Is there like a discrete size threshold?
Yeah, I mean, the human-robot collaboration is enabled by revision of standards. So since 2011, there are certain conditions for robots to be able to work with people. And theoretically, any robot can be made collaborative now, but you're not going to get great big robots, swinging around. It's not that frightening. So there's very stringent power and force limitations for robots that can interact with people.
Are there some manufacturing industries that are still that are resistant to using robots at all, that are still producing at high volumes, but just only using human labor?
Well, that's a bigger question of kind of the economic development. So manufacturing itself is a very capital-intensive industry. So once you have an investment in a certain type of machine, you're not going to replace that without doing, all the math, figuring out what the return on investment is, what's it going to cost to bring in the robot. And it's a slow process, and there are plenty of companies. In the United States, more than 98% of the manufacturing companies are small companies, less than 500 people. And so plenty of those companies are just like family-owned businesses, small businesses. The owners who started the company may be looking at retirement in 5 to 10 years. They're not going to be investing in a lot of new technology. They're looking at, how can I finish out this cycle? So I can't say like there's a particular industry sector that's resistant, but I think it's a business call.
Yeah, if we think they are mainly so-called in Finland and also in Sweden, big export companies like Kone, cranes and that kind of places. And there are also in those digital investment firms, some of those so-called startups, quite enthusiastic startups who are making big investments but maybe not survive after that. We have seen that also. It's some kind of creative death or end, what they find quite rapidly. But we know that, for example, in Finland there is a quite huge branch of game industry, and they are using all kind of these digitalized systems and computers and so naturally. So we have to think that when we are talking about industry, it doesn't mean that it's material, the subject what we are producing. It can be immaterial service or something like that too. So industry has moved more that shape that it's combining this both material and immaterial services or only serving services. Yeah, logistics and so.
Thank you. If there aren't any other questions, thank you very much to our speakers. It was great insights today. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.